believe in myself. Put nobody above myself. Energy, energy, build your energy. Love, charity, what a sight to see. What a sight to see. What a colossal. Working and working and working to prosper. What you gonna stop for? Keep on this right on the corner. Hey, make way when I'm weird there. Hey, tell the ears that them stay there. Hey, that is your destiny. To be what you ought to be. Even if no one you reach nowhere. So you have to find a way. Them no one you reach nowhere. So you have to find a way. Them no one can see you fly. Them no one can see you touch sky. Them no one can see you fly. Hey. Them no one can see you fly. Them no one can see you touch sky. Them no one can see you fly.
Yes, good night, everybody. First Monday in March, Twins Day, week on Ruby Day, birthday. But we're gonna get into some financial matters this evening, and we're gonna be dealing with matters, geopolitical matters in the Middle East, lot of Iran. What's on other things? First thing we're gonna start off with is actually the central bank. Well, the first thing I could say about the first issue, it is not financial advice. It is just an observation of something that is going on in the financial world. So we're gonna take a little peep on that. But it is not financial advice. You don't have to go out and buy gold all of a sudden. That's not gonna be making sense. But it's an observation of what's been going on. And a kind of question. I heard the Prime Minister say recently one of the good things to show that the economy is doing good is that the central bank made record profits. That is incorrect, sir. The duty of the central bank is like to make sure, inflation is down, control interest rates, money flow, big picture stuff, not necessarily to make a profit. And of course, the central bank is responsible to the entire Eastern Caribbean, and I just think it's on the US. But anyway, we're getting a little gold talk first thing. And even before I start that, tomorrow, interview with the premier, and also there will be an album dropping, I think from 6 p.m. That will be 7 p.m. in Nevis time, but 6 p.m. in North America. I think 10 o'clock and 11 o'clock in Europe. Something like that. Earlier, obviously, when you go back further. But anyway, we're going to get into some gold talk. And there's also the premiere. So I get our questions ready for the premiere. We'll be appearing to answer the questions that the people want answered. So I hope I got questions that are on par with the press conference,
In 2025, the global financial system crossed a historic threshold. The US dollar's share of global foreign exchange reserves fell to roughly 40%, which is the lowest level in more than 20 years. Over the past decade, the dollar lost 18 percentage points of reserve share as central banks steadily reduced their reliance on a single currency. At the same time, gold made a decisive comeback. Central banks increased gold's share of reserves by 12 percentage points, pushing it to 28%, which is the highest level since the early 1990s. For the first time in modern history, gold now represents a larger share of global reserves than the euro, Japanese yen, and British pound combined. This shift did not happen overnight. Rising geopolitical tensions, sanctions, and currency weaponization forced policymakers to rethink risk. Holding dollars meant exposure to American policy and financial systems. Gold, by contrast, carried no counterparty risk, no default risk, and no political allegiance. It could not be frozen, sanctioned, or devalued by decree. Central banks, meanwhile, responded accordingly. They accelerated gold purchases, moving physical bullion into domestic vaults at a pace not seen in decades. These flows fundamentally altered markets. In 2025, gold prices surged 65%, marking their strongest annual performance since 1979. Meanwhile, the USD index fell 9.4%, which is its worst yearly decline in 8 years. Experts say this is not the end of the dollar, but is the end of unquestioned dominance. The world began transitioning toward a more multipolar reserve system where trust is spread across assets rather than concentrated in one currency. Gold's rise reflects that reality. It is no longer just a hedge. It is becoming the foundation of a new global financial balance. That shift will reshape reserves, markets, power, and monetary strategy worldwide.
Okay. So, what the lady has explained to us there is why central banks have been investing so heavily in gold. You can't freeze gold, you can't sanction gold. And so, therefore, central banks have been investing further in gold. She also, when she spoke about the US dollar being 9% down, this is speaking about the purchasing power. When you have actual dollars in your hand, the purchasing power, where you could buy today, it gonna cost you more tomorrow. It's better to have your money some portion of your money invested. And so this is why central banks have turned to gold. Because no matter what, at the end of the day, who got the gold really matters. And this does not apply only to gold, even though Bitcoin has been getting some blows. One of the other aspects of this, I'm trying to check Bitcoin price. Okay, Bitcoin up a little bit, but it's just also a fact that governments, central banks, and individuals are trying to protect themselves by having money in different forms. And having some money in gold is certainly helpful, regardless of the circumstance. Okay, nice and easy. Everybody can understand that. One of the issues that has been spoken about recently is the birth rate issue. And I find two videos I found were helpful. I think this was mentioned by both the St. John's candidates. Certainly the Prime Minister has mentioned this. So I would like to go to this birth rate video. This is a video speaking about why certain elites would like a high birth rate. So let me see what I got.
Governments and a long list of highly influential people around the world really want you to have children, and they are seemingly pulling out all the stops to make it happen. Dozens of countries like Australia, France, and even certain states in the USA have tax incentives for families with children, other policies like subsidized childcare, several others offer years of paid parental leave, gift baskets, housing bonuses, healthcare support, and when that hasn't worked, some countries like South Korea, Singapore, and Russia have been even more direct by offering cash payments for newborns, sometimes even going as far as having compounding payouts for every additional child after the first. As it's
Okay, so we start with cash for kids. So we got countries going to the extent of saying, you know, and we're gonna see what the government going to do. Because if this gonna come to parliament, they gonna have to be some kind of policy we dealing with, you know. So we're gonna hear what they got, but they don't mention countries giving out cash for kids.
Become clear, the carrot alone isn't moving the needle. Several governments, including our own, have started playing around with ideas like additional taxes exclusively for single people and childless couples. Going even further, China has started taxing ham holsters in a last-ditch attempt to get people to have some damn babies by any means necessary. These efforts are collectively costing regular taxpayers hundreds.
Okay, so see a couple more strategies there. You could tax the single people. Tax the people who don't have children. Not target me, but anyway. Well, in terms of one aspect, I'm not single. But anyway, and the other one is tax contraceptives. Tax you for buying a condom. Tax you for getting the pill, them kind of circumstances. These are other policies to consider.
Of billions of dollars every year, which does raise the important question. Why are we doing this? Why are we pushing so hard to make people make babies? Well, there are actually a few arguments that get thrown around, as well as some questionable motivations that we will address later. But the overwhelming alarm bell that is being sounded right now is that if we don't get down to it, we're going to have a demographic collapse. There will be too many old people and not enough young people to support them either directly through physical assistance or indirectly through taxes, spending, or investments to fund their retirement programs.
Social Security. Not care where you're looking at the wall. Social Security coming for you.
It does admittedly sound pretty concerning, especially for most of you watching who are statistically in the age group that is going to be hit by these demographic changes the hardest. But if you then think about it a little bit more, these arguments just raise even more questions. Like, well, why are some countries like Switzerland going in the opposite direction and trying to legislate a hard cap on their population? Closer to home, it might be a bit hard for a lot of you watching to stomach the idea that we just need more young people, as youth unemployment and underemployment skyrockets. And then there is the most existential question of all. Is this current obsession with natalism a tacit admission that our whole system has turned into some kind of Ponzi scheme that only works if we have a constant supply of people entering the bottom to support the people at the top?
The baby bonus.
Baby bonus.
A baby bonus.
China now offers cash to families with kids under the age of 3.
Out baby bonuses last year and says it's already boosted staff births.
Why many Japanese women are choosing not to have children.
Child-free lifestyle is now illegal in Russia.
Birth control that was once tax-free, well, it's now taxed.
Switzerland is going to the polls to vote on whether they should cap the country's population at 10 million people.
Okay, so before we dive into personal and societal trade-offs of having or not having children, we first need to address some of the hypocritical ironies coming from a lot of the biggest voices on this issue. The demographic collapse problem has become a central talking point, especially amongst the regular suspects of big tech. Sam Altman, Jeff Bezos, and Jack Ma have all explicitly given interviews or published their thoughts on the threats posed by depopulation. Going even further, Peter Thiel and Elon Musk have both highlighted the problem as one of the most immediate threats facing humanity.
Well, Elon Musk do his part, so they can't say he a hypocrite for that.
There are not enough people. I can't emphasize this enough. There are not enough people.
Now, in Musk's defense, he is doing his part to single-handedly correct this issue.
As I said, doing his part.
And Thiel is, at best, indifferent to humanity continuing in the first place.
Should the human race survive?
Yes.
Okay.
But anyway, the point is that all of these people are going to great lengths to warn us about the dangers of not having enough young people entering the workforce, while simultaneously betting hundreds of billions of dollars that they can replace the same workforce with AI. Now, you might personally be skeptical about the promises of AI, and you might also personally think that the threat of a demographic collapse is real.
As you mentioned this, I don't know if any reporter has asked the premier about AI. I don't know if anybody has spoken to the prime minister about AI, but it is irresponsible in 2026 to not be figuring out how you could be incorporating AI into some kind of systems to make government flow in a more efficient manner. There must be something that AI could help you with. And I think there should be a massive investment into IT. It's that time. I think that when I say a massive investment, I feel like in terms of infrastructure, obviously, equipment, obviously, also payment, compensation for the work that people are got to do, for the skills people gonna gain, and make it an attractive thing. One of the things Navy should try to be ahead of is technology. The small size could assist with that. But that was a side note. We're really dealing with the birth rate.
But if this technology is going to do what these people claim it is going to do, not having enough people should be the least of our problems, right? Now, the ironies that come up in this debate don't stop there, and we will get to the true threat of a demographic collapse at the end. But in the meantime, you should probably consider the three other big motivations.
So that's a dagger against the argument as well, because since they're gonna get AI and AI gonna replace everybody, then they're not supposed to be a worry about more people. So that's a contradiction for against. But let me see.
That might also explain why these people have become so obsessed with natalism. The first is that naturally, a lot of powerful, wealthy, and influential groups want to make sure that they have a stable supply of workers, customers, and debtors. More people in a market on average means more economic activity in a way that is especially good for business owners. A lot of these big tech platforms in particular have already reached every single user they possibly can. So the only way to get more Amazon Prime members, Grok edgelords, or Palantir database entries is to have more children and a growing population. The same fear is being bloated in these articles around a shrinking population's ability to bear the burden of rising global debt. Now, of course, there is an element of truth to this. National debt in almost every advanced economy around the world has increased significantly, and a big tailwind behind that debt has been supporting old age social programs like pensions and carers. If the population shrinks, it means that this debt burden will need to be lifted by a smaller base of taxpayers, and this is a very serious issue. But it's also a bit ironic coming largely from the people that own a majority of that government debt in the first place. The solution.
So you see that if the population gets smaller, is less people going to have to pay more to subsidize the debt, to make sure you're paying for Social Security. This is why Social Security is supposed to run out in 2040, unless something is done to revamp that system.
Being presented is for more working class people to make the sacrifices needed to raise children as some kind of sacrifice to the economic machine god, without addressing some logical alternatives like less government spending to subsidize their businesses, or, just more effective taxation. Now, to play devil's advocate, maybe the solution is some combination of all of these, but at the very least, it is irresponsible to ignore the other two and conclude that the solution is just more manpower. Now, that alone doesn't sound like a great motivation to change government policy around families, but having a constant supply of debtors is just the first reason. It gets worse. So it's time to learn how money works to find out why having more kids is being presented as a solution to all of our problems. This week's video is sponsored by Storyblocks. Do you want
I don't want to hear about story blocks though.
Stable supply of workers. If there are more people competing for the same job, then businesses can normally get away with paying less, demanding more, and experiencing less staff turnover because nobody wants to lose their job. Steven Sinofsky, a former Microsoft Windows chief, and Eric Schmidt, the former CEO of Google, both said this quiet part out loud in interviews stating that human workers were going to be at a premium. In basic economic terms, if a business wants to produce something, it needs some combination of the four factors of production, capital, land, entrepreneurship, and labor. You need investment into tools and processes, you need land to operate on, you need business leadership to come up with ideas and make strategic decisions, and you need workers to actually put everything into action. Naturally, the more limited the supply is of any of these four factors, the more expensive it will become in the process. Venture capitalists and wealthy investors largely have the market for these three factors cornered, but labor belongs to the individual. If there is not enough workers, then the value of labor will increase relative to these other factors. In plain English, if finding enough manpower becomes the limiting resource in most business operations, then those businesses will need to start paying more for that manpower. Now, obviously, to the people that make most of their money by owning these other three factors of production, this is a terrifying prospect. Now, I can't believe I'm going to be doing this twice in one video, but to play devil's advocate again, some people in particular, like Mark Andreessen, a major venture capitalist, have used this idea to advocate for the value of AI. In most of his press on the issue, he has effectively said that running out of workers would cripple major industries, especially those supporting the elderly. But if AI can replace or leverage that work, then it won't be such an immediate issue. It's obviously a business-first mindset, but it is, at the very least, logically coherent. Now, we can't read the minds of the other major voices on this issue, but one possible theory is that on one hand, they obviously all have a vested interest in developing AI technologies that could replace or augment human workers, but if that doesn't work out the way they are hoping, it would be nice to have a stable supply of good old-fashioned human labor as a backup plan to keep their businesses going. The argument that we are running out of workers also conveniently supports policies like skilled worker visas that became a bit of a political sticking point last year. These tech companies in particular have benefited greatly from programs like H-1B visas that let companies employ expat workers on the condition that they remain employed by the company. This has introduced more competition into the already saturated market for entry-level tech workers, but it also has the convenient side effect that the people working on these visas are dependent on their company to stay in the country, so they are far less likely to negotiate for better pay, benefits, or threaten to leave their role.
The only thing will catch me in another video is it look like he said everything bad. Because if the population go down, less people are carry the burden. But when the population go up, there's more people are for the job. So it look like you can't win. You're just in the rat race.
Because they can't leave their role. A paper published by the National Bureau of Economic Research found that on average, one additional H-1B worker in a firm crowded out 1.5 other workers at that same firm. Now, skilled immigration is a whole separate issue, but it does clearly demonstrate what you probably already knew, which is that big companies want a market with lots of workers, all competing for a small selection of jobs because that maximizes their negotiating power. Now, where those workers come from has a lot to do with the third hidden motivation that might help explain this new obsession with birth rates. I don't want to dwell on it too much, because it is outside the confines of business, economics, and the job market, but it would be irresponsible to not at least acknowledge that there are some ideological motivations behind this push as well. Having lots of children.
Okay, the music changed, so it looked like we reached down to the sinister part of this thing. And you're talking professionally now, talking about ideological reasons. And I don't see something about superiority and all kind of things. So let me see what's going on.
Pairs well with traditional family values, gender roles, family planning debates, and of course, having the population of the right kind of people. How much the big voices on this topic actually believe in this stuff is hard to say. But if it supports their ultimate goals, they are clearly happy to have it on their side in policy debates. So yeah, maintaining a constant supply of workers, consumers, debt payers, all in the correct cultural package clearly isn't something that normal people are considering when choosing to have a family. and they aren't exactly great reasons to be tailoring policy so heavily towards encouraging people to have kids, especially if they can't responsibly afford it. Again, more on that soon. But just because there are bad motivations mixed into this debate, it doesn't necessarily mean that the threats posed by changing demographics aren't to be taken seriously. They do, however, need to be looked at pragmatically. Here in America, we are not as far along in this fertility trend as a lot of other countries in Western Europe, and we are a long way behind the true outliers in Asia. Taiwan, China, South Korea, and Singapore now have birth rates less than half of the replacement rate of.
I feel like one thing the policymakers need to do, they need to have this. They need to have this data in place so that we could see where we are with regards to replacement rate and these type of situations. As I say, every situation demand a different handle. Everyone is unique. So I feel like this data need to be provided so that people can understand what the real situation is and if something really need to be done.
Roughly 2.1 births per woman. South Korea in particular has a birth rate less than half of ours here in America, and we are already told that we have a problem. This is to show that things can still go a lot further, but ultimately the trend has been towards fewer children across the world. But this has also been happening.
You see the story there? South Africa created a ministry, and because of the low birth rate, I don't understand what a ministry the name.
At the same time as other changes that are very important to consider in context. Here in America, our labor force participation rate has been declining since 1999. Youth employment in most of Europe remains very high. And even in places like South Korea, with what many consider to be disastrously low birth rates, the competition amongst young workers for entry-level jobs is unbelievably competitive. The point across all of these economies is that if we really are running out of young workers, we are doing a terrible job of using the ones we already have. Now, there are structural problems like skills gaps, people taking early retirement, opting out of the workforce entirely, or whatever the reason is given for this logical irony. But whatever the true cause may be, throwing more people at the problem is not a sustainable solution. Even for immediate issues like funding pension systems, the problem is that if birth rates continue to decline and life expectancy continues to increase, there will be more people taking out than putting money in. So either the young people will be forced to contribute more, or the retirees will have to make do with less. But if there really were no other solutions, then this problem itself is an acknowledgement that the whole system only works if there is a continual supply of new people at the bottom to support the people at the top. And with that simple breakdown, you might be able to see why some people have just called this a generational Ponzi scheme. But the thing is, there are other solutions that should be at least considered alongside directly paying people to have children. For you individually, you should probably assume that you will need to self-fund your retirement. Even if you're wrong, it's better to have a nest egg and not need it than to need it and not have it. On a larger scale, if workers really are becoming a rare commodity, we should try to treat them as such. Making it easier for them to access the right skills and engage with a job market that isn't openly hostile will do a lot more for getting people into roles than just making more people. Additionally, when it comes to funding support for people in their
I feel like in that spirit there, that's why you need an art school as well. I feel like even when you watch Casey and what he doing as a photographer, I don't necessarily feel like everybody need to have some kind of high degree in some kind of science. You got people who are very artistic. You got people who might could sing, they might could dance. I feel like getting people trained in those principles would have more of an effect on the culture. And we do say we're dealing with culture armor than a lot of different things. And it will also provide people an opportunity to have different careers than just the typical thing that we offer.
old age, the arithmetic doesn't need to rely on just increasing the total number of people paying into the system. It can also come from just receiving more from the people who can afford it most. Now, of course, the arguments around more effective taxation on the ultra-wealthy individuals won't be new to any of you watching. But when this becomes a problem of either getting the same money from more people or getting more money from a small group of people, you might be able to see why the same group of wealthy individuals is supporting the former option rather than the latter. One of the most frustrating things about this issue is that a lot of people actually do want to have children, but simply can't afford to raise them with the quality of life they would want for those children. For some, having a family has become a status symbol, quietly indicating that people have the means to forego some aspect of their career and cover the rising costs associated with raising children. For everybody else that is still thinking about the decision logically, their mind isn't going to be swayed one way or another by some tax credits or a baby bonus. So go and watch this video next to find out what is stopping us from
done video for today. So this is some reasons from the business side, some reasons from the economic side with regards to social security as to why people would like a higher birth rate. So, and all of them lay back the money. So, with regards to that aspect, is all about the money. So far, we 2 for 2 on the money. And this next one is about housing costs. And what you must understand about this circumstance, like, you really got to talk to, if you got a grandmother at this time, you know, your parents, just talk to them about how much it used to cost to build a house. You will be amazed by some of the numbers that they tell you to build a house. And then when you consider right there that the purchasing power you have lost, how much they will tell you is minimum wage, and they will expect people to be building house, much less affording rent, with minimum wage. So this next one is about that aspect. Yeah, but me not see no screen. I don't want to pull up this thing and I ain't got no screen, you know. No, me ain't playing that. No, me can't play. I can't play that video there. Ain't got no screen. So I apologize. I can't play the whole scene video at this time. Maybe I could get it out and I could play it a little later. But now we're getting into another financial aspect. This aspect is gonna be the reason you hear politicians blame for things going wrong over the next, I would say, 12 to 18 months. They're gonna be using this excuse about the closure of the Straits of Hormuz. And you're gonna learn in this next video why this particular piece of the ocean is very important to international trade. It's important to you. There's a lot of products passed through there. This is responsible for a good portion of production in Southeast Asia. And a lot of these goods are traded right back over here. So we're going to get to the Straits of Hormuz now.
In the web of global trade, certain places are simply more important. A handful of narrow waterways, or choke points, act as arteries for world commerce. but one stands alone in its terrifying importance. A passage just 21 miles wide separating Iran and Oman. This is the Strait of Hormuz. It's not just a shipping lane, it is the jugular vein of the global energy economy. What happens here can affect the price of gas you buy, the cost of goods, and the stability of the entire world. Every single day, around 20 million barrels of oil flow through this narrow water. That's a fifth of all petroleum the world consumes. Annually, a quarter of all seaborne oil trade passes through this.
So, immediately down here, price of gas. Because of what's taking place in the Middle East at this time, and at least we was going to get to that. And we're here right now. So the price of gasoline, which I think last week was 60 something dollars, about 66, $68 a barrel. I think it's already gone up to $72 a barrel. The last time I checked, let me see. Oil prices. Okay, $71 a barrel. People are saying if this is extended, an extended combat mission, that the oil is gonna go above $100 a barrel if you get a real bad 150, but we're very far from that at this time. But I'm just telling you, should it get there, and I've heard varying things on how long this is gonna last, because I think I heard recently it's gonna last between 3 and 4 weeks, which would definitely have an effect on your pocket. So please pay attention to what's going on in the Middle East. It does affect you. It affects the goods you partake in. It is a very important shipping lane. See, it is right there in the point. That's the Straits of Hormuz. And it's a 20 million barrels of oil there, which is 20% of all the oil in the world that's passed through that little narrow body of water there. Anyway.
This one spot. The value of this cargo is staggering, often topping $1 billion a day. This is the Strait of Hormuz, and Iran has repeatedly threatened to sever this artery at a moment's notice, a move that could trigger an unprecedented global economic crisis. To understand the danger, you have to understand the dependency. The Strait of Hormuz is the only sea passage from the Persian Gulf to the open ocean. This makes it the primary export route for the oil and gas giants of the Middle East: Saudi Arabia, the UAE, Kuwait, Qatar, Iraq, and Iran itself. All of these cornerstones of the world's energy supply rely on this single exit. The volume is staggering. In 2024, an average of 20 million barrels of oil passed through daily. On top of that, about a fifth of the entire world's liquefied natural gas, or LNG, mainly from Qatar, makes the same journey. It's a single...
So, LNG is well, you know, when you look at your tank of gas. So, we're not only speaking about the oil, we're talking about LNG will also be hit. So, this is another thing to think about for people who don't have an electric stove, who still got gas, and, you know, definitely many people still utilize their gas. So, this is also another thing to look out for.
single doorway through which a fifth of the planet's daily energy supply must pass. If that door closes, the lights start to go out. So, where is all this energy headed? The answer reveals a paradox in global security. An estimated 84% of the crude oil and 83% of the LNG that moves through the strait is destined for Asia. The economies of China.
So if you look at it, if it's 20 million barrel a day, 16 million barrel is heading for Asia. And Southeast Asia got in a lot of countries, but we know a lot of it is gonna be going to China. And if the China got to pay more, then everybody got to pay more because China is the factory. So also another thing to bear in mind.
India, Japan, and South Korea are deeply vulnerable, receiving about 69% of all the crude oil.
South Korea, Samsung. South Korea, Samsung.
Oil from the strait. These nations lack major domestic energy resources and rely on these maritime imports to power their economies. This creates a geopolitical imbalance. The nations most dependent on the strait's security are in Asia, yet the main military force protecting it is the United States Navy's Fifth Fleet, based in Bahrain. For decades, the U.S. has underwritten the security.
I think this fleet, actually, the headquarters has been targeted by Iran, but may I say Iran. But yeah, this is the fleet that has the responsibility for making sure that the strait remains open at all times.
Security of a waterway that largely powers its economic rivals. The global economy, especially Asia's industrial powerhouses, has essentially outsourced its energy security, placing its trust in a fragile peace. Looming over this vital waterway is Iran. From its long coastline, Iran's military has a commanding position over the shipping channels. For years, Tehran has used the threat of closing the strait as its ultimate bargaining chip in response to international pressure or sanctions. How could Iran actually do it?
I think they actually did it maybe like 10 days ago, 2 weeks ago, to do some military drills with China and Russia. So, facts, definitely Iran does threaten and does sometimes actually close parts of the strait to show their power. And you could see, I think they have the longest coastline in that region. Another thing to consider with regards to this conflict that is taking place. I'm not sure if you're aware, if you're familiar with Iran, but Iran is a country, when you're reading and you hear about the Medes or the Persians, this is those people. So they have been there for a significant period of time. This is one of what I would call the cradles of civilization. When you hear about Darius and them people, this is them people. Obviously, it's the same geography, and the people believe different things, but I'm just saying, this is a civilization that has been there. And also, of note, if you combine Spain, France, Portugal, and put on Germany on top, that would be the size of Iran. Iran is a massive country. Iran is 636 square miles. So it's a massive country. and they do have a long history. This is gonna be different than what took place in Venezuela, certainly. But I think that the overall aim for the outcomes remain very similar and possible, but similar.
Iran knows it can't win a conventional naval battle with the United States.
Okay, so this is another thing. Eh? When you fighting, sometimes in order to assess the circumstances, you gotta have a strategic goal in mind, some kind of strategic aim. And I think the United States have been clear. The president has said that they're trying to make sure that Iran can't get nuclear weapons, trying to degrade their ability to build a ballistics program and to destroy those platforms, all those capabilities. And I think Israel has been focused on the leadership. And, you know, they've done what they had to do in those areas. But on Iran's side, Iran is simply trying to survive. And if they survive without any type of regime change, and from the Venezuela discussion where we had, you recall, I tell you, it's not a regime change if you take over just the one man. No, they have been effective, and they have taken out a significant portion of the senior leadership. But that's why I started off earlier and said Iran is a long-standing civilization. And so, in order to change a regime, necessarily, it is not generally done from the air. You normally got to get some boots on the ground. And, well, we're going to lead into that strategy later, I suppose.
Instead, it has perfected a doctrine of asymmetric warfare, designed to cause maximum disruption with unconventional tactics. Iran's first tool is the naval mine. Using small boats or submarines, it could covertly lay hundreds of cheap mines in the shipping lanes. The mere suspicion of mines would be enough to halt all traffic, as insurance rates would skyrocket and shipping companies would refuse to risk their vessels.
Insurance has already become a problem. I think we're into a day 4 of this war, and insurance companies have already hiked up the rates, so that's also another reason why the cost of living is going to increase as a result of this exchange that is happening at the moment.
Clearing a minefield is a slow, dangerous process that could keep the strait closed for weeks. Next is the threat of swarm tactics. Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps Navy, IRGCN, operates a huge fleet of small, fast, heavily armed speedboats. In large numbers, they could swarm a slow-moving oil tanker using rockets and anti-ship missiles to harass, damage, and disable it, blocking the shipping lanes. Along its coast, Iran has also positioned a formidable arsenal of land-based anti-ship cruise missiles. These are mobile, hard to target, and can be launched with little warning. Finally, Iran has shown its willingness to board and seize commercial vessels. Using helicopters and fast boats, IRGC forces can take control of a tanker and force it into an Iranian port. These acts of state-sponsored piracy create extreme uncertainty for all shipping in the region. The goal of these tactics isn't to win a
to a certain extent, when you're talking about Iran, because you're talking about the IRGC, this is like the royal like the royal guard. And this is where I say, like, you know, these are the same people that you read about, like, kind of in the Bible. When I say as they're talking about the Medes or the Medes, however you want to pronounce it. But, like, it's that kind of aspect, but it's just in modern times, the revolutionary guard.
War, but to make the Strait of Hormuz impassable and stop the lifeblood of the global economy from flowing. The economic fallout from a Hormuz closure would be immediate and catastrophic. With 20 million barrels per day suddenly taken off the market, the global oil supply would plummet by 20%. Even the threat of disruption makes markets panic. A full-scale shutdown would be on another level. Worst-case scenarios project the price of Brent crude could spike to $150 or even $200 per barrel. This isn't just a number on a screen. It would mean
I don't even know what to say as far as preparation for that. I have no idea how that would even translate to many people. That's basically double to 3 times the amount of what we're paying for gas right now from an extended closure. And this is why it's important to pay attention to what is taking place over in Iran and the outcomes. Because, as I say, when you do these things, you go have a goal in mind. And there is a possibility for Mr. Trump definitely to win this. But we don't get to see the ultimate outcome.
A painful, immediate spike in gasoline prices. But the impact goes far deeper. Oil is used to produce plastics, transport goods, and power industry. A doubling or tripling of its price would ripple through every part of the economy. The cost of shipping everything, from electronics to food, would skyrocket, leading directly to inflation. As businesses face higher energy and transportation costs, those costs get passed on to consumers, hitting lower-income households the hardest. The world could face stagflation, a toxic mix of high inflation and stagnant economic growth. The shock would be especially severe for natural gas markets. About a fifth of global LNG trade, vital for nations in Asia and Europe, passes through the strait. Unlike oil, there are virtually no alternative routes for this gas. A closure would be a devastating blow, forcing countries to compete for already scarce supplies and driving prices to astronomical levels. The world does have some buffers, like strategic petroleum reserves, but these are finite and meant for short-term emergencies. Some producers, like Saudi Arabia and the UAE, have spare production capacity, but a 20 million barrel per day shortfall would overwhelm these buffers quickly. The world's economic stability rests on the
Another one of the issues, because OPEC actually had a meeting yesterday, and a number of the OPEC countries are actually right in the little screen there. Saudi Arabia, Iran, you also got Russia, you got Algeria, you got a couple other countries, but a lot of them right in there. And they mentioned that they would increase the amount of oil being put out in order to compensate. But in order to compensate for 20%, it could be an issue. And it's also a situation where Russia is actually looking like they might benefit from what is taking place right now. Because, as I said, the price of oil going up. So certain countries might actually want to, they might have incentives to do otherwise in order to get maximum.
21-mile-wide channel of the Strait of Hormuz. An attempt by Iran to close the strait would trigger an immediate geopolitical crisis, turning the Persian Gulf into the world's most critical chessboard. The main player would be the United States. The U.S. Navy's Fifth Fleet is the dominant military force in the region, and its core mission is ensuring the free flow of commerce. An attempt to close the strait would be a direct challenge to American credibility, and the response would likely be massive and swift. The U.S. would probably form an international coalition with allies like the UK and France to reopen the strait by force. This could involve everything from minesweeping to targeting the Iranian assets used in the blockade. This is where it gets complicated. Iran's main customers in Asia would be in a tough spot. China, in particular, finds itself in a strategic bind. It's Iran's key political backer and the primary buyer of its oil. A closure would crush China's energy security, yet siding with a US-led military intervention against its partner is almost unthinkable.
Got to pay attention to China. And the response is not likely to be someone we could see. Something flashy, but got to pay attention to the response. And it's also a good point. Iran closing the strait is not gonna get them any friends. Them attacking other countries, I don't think that is buying them anything either. That actually is more likely to get people to go after them. But having said that, that means that it is more likely to be a regional escalation. And if this small thing turns into a regional escalation, now we have no idea what is actually gonna come out of this. This is a situation where you gotta pay close attention to what is taking place right now and also the ultimate outcome. Who takes over? How amenable are they? Was it that they laid down their arms and were defeated? Or was it that it was basically a draw? And Iran would take a draw as a win. So I think that at this point, it got to be an all-out capitulation, it seemed like.
Beijing would be forced to walk a diplomatic tightrope. This highlights the central paradox. While over 80% of the oil is headed to Asia, the security burden falls on Washington. A crisis would also put immense pressure on Iran's neighbors. Saudi Arabia and the UAE, regional rivals of Iran, would see their economies devastated and would likely support a US-led response. However, they would also be vulnerable to direct retaliation from Iran, including missile or drone strikes on their own oil infrastructure. A military clash in the confined waters of the Gulf could escalate rapidly, with consequences far beyond the price of oil. Given the catastrophic consequences, how likely is a full closure to actually happen? Most experts agree it's a low probability event, primarily because it would be an act of economic self-harm. Iran's own economy is incredibly dependent on its seaborne oil exports, which must pass through the Strait of Hormuz. Closing it would be like blockading itself, cutting off the main revenue stream that...
Well, in addition to the Straits of Hormuz, if we look just to the left of that body of water there that look like a lake, that is the Red Sea. And going back to the Bible, that's the sea that Moses walked across, the Red Sea right there. Just before you go into the Red Sea is what they call the Babel Mandev Strait. So it's the same kind of features. Anytime you got this, like the point, this is the beginning of you getting into the body of water. So they call that a strait. This strait is also important. This strait carried up the price. Nike a couple of years ago because it was shut down for like 6 days. And if you look, the end of that country there is what you call Yemen, and in the middle is Saudi Arabia. Now, Iran is said to have some proxies in Yemen. These are the people called the Houthis. And they are also threatening to close on that strait as well. So, and that body of water there is responsible at 10% of world trade. If you can't go through that, no, you got to go around South Africa, and there's reasons why you don't want to sail around South Africa. So that would not be a good idea. So once again, if this becomes a regional conflict, now we have a situation where it will reach you at some kind of time when you want to buy a gift, some kind of time when you want to do something. You are going to notice significant increases because of this exchange.
Keeps its government afloat. Such an act would also alienate its most important partner, China. Recognizing this vulnerability, Iran's rivals have invested in alternative routes, but their capacity is limited. Saudi Arabia operates the East-West pipeline, which can carry about 5 million barrels per day to the Red Sea, bypassing Hormuz. The UAE operates the Abu Dhabi crude oil pipeline, which can carry about 1.8 million barrels per day to the Gulf of Oman. Together, these bypasses offer a potential capacity of around 3.5 to 5.5 million barrels per day. While significant, that's a fraction of the 20 million barrels that pass through the strait daily.
So you're talking about like what, 18.5% to like 27.5% of what used to happen. That's out of your pocket.
These pipelines could soften the impact, but they can't eliminate it. The vast majority of the region's oil and LNG would still be trapped. This reality forces everyone into a delicate balancing act. Iran uses the threat of closure as a deterrent, knowing a limited disruption sends a powerful message without inviting a massive military response. For the rest of the world, it's a constant exercise in risk management. The Strait of Hormuz is a permanent vulnerability in the global system, a problem to be managed but never truly solved. The Strait of Hormuz is more than just a line on a map. It's a symbol of how fragile our interconnected world really is. A place where ancient rivalries meet the relentless demands of the modern economy. The flow of oil through this narrow channel is a constant, humming reminder of our shared dependency on a stable world. The daily passage of tankers is a testament to a system that, most of the time, works. But the military patrols, asymmetric threats, and tense geopolitical maneuvering are a reminder of how easily that system could break. A closure of the strait, however unlikely, would represent a failure of diplomacy and a descent into a crisis that would spare no corner of the globe. How long can the world's most critical energy artery remain flanked by one of its most determined geopolitical spoilers? The perilous journey through the Strait of Hormuz continues, day after day, with the stability of the global economy navigating the most dangerous oil route on Earth.
As I say, that's something to be very mindful of. It's gonna have an impact. The final thing that we're gonna do is we actually gonna look at the conflict. And early, we could see certain things within the conflict. I think I already mentioned what each side objective is. One side objective is simply to survive. The other side objective is to degrade any capabilities of offensive threat to the United States, their allies, and the world. So now we can look at the conflict from a retired military expert, and he's great at communication, Chris Cappy. So we're gonna hear what he got to say. By the way, America, they seem to have exceptional intelligence. This is one thing that has to be fundamentally understood. To go and get Maduro, go in here now, and they have gotten the Ayatollah, the supreme leader of Iran. No, it wasn't necessarily clean, but they do that. They have gotten a lot of the leadership. And again, even say if it's them, if it's Israel, but overall, the combined team has executed certainly to begin with. So anyway, Chris gonna tell you what going on.
The United States is war maxing again. Behind me is the live conflict map showing where U.S. and Israeli forces just struck inside of Iran. Every one of these geolocated icons that you see here marks a confirmed impact point. Fighter jets and cruise missiles hit regime targets across the country, even killing Iran's supreme leader, Khamenei. And today we're going to get into how they accomplished that. Because on February 28th, 2026, the United States and Israel launched what was called Operation Epic Fury.
And just before this thing started, I did say last week, it's not possible to have the type of equipment that is over there at this moment in time. They have 2 aircraft carriers, and they got a bunch of other boats. I can't recall them secondary boat, but I think destroyers, they got a bunch of those out there as well. They got some mini carriers over there. You can't have that type of equipment idling for weeks on end. So it was on the cards that something was gonna happen. And last week Friday, something did happen.
Massive joint attack against the Islamic Republic. More than 1,000 targets were hit just in the opening wave alone. The stated objective is simple: regime.
More than 1,000 targets hit in the opening salvo. It's a February 28th. More than 1,000 targets hit. And some of those targets, not good. And some of those are where I think that you also got to look at. I think there's going to be some type of vote on the war powers on what this action is. There's no boots on the ground. I think that there's been key not to say that this is a war. But over 1,000 targets hit. Seems like the beginning of something.
Change. So today, we're going to map out this offensive campaign. We're going to examine Iran's retaliation, and we're going to conduct an initial battle damage assessment to see how close U.S. forces are to their stated goal of regime change. Then, at the end of the video, we'll zoom out a little bit, and we'll look at how this operation fits into the broader American grand strategy that we see unfolding across the globe in the past few weeks. The attack began at 9 a.m. local time in Iran, and from that moment, the clock started ticking. And that's because it was a race between two different strategies. Could the US and Israel dismantle the regime's ballistic missiles fast enough, or could Tehran sustain a relentless pace of strikes before retaliating with their own ballistic missile storm? Surprisingly, the attack began in broad daylight, and we'll see.
So, from what I could see off of that map there, it seemed like the entire west coast of Iran has been destroyed. And a couple of things around Tehran have been destroyed from what I could see off that map there.
See why in just a minute. In the morning hours, a wave of airstrikes hit the Iranian capital of Tehran. Just massive explosions shook the city, and according to eyewitness accounts, they triggered chaos across multiple different districts. Videos are now emerging, and they show the sheer scale of destruction. And that matters, because if you look at the Iranian population density map here, because I love looking at maps, you can see that the vast majority of people live right here in Tehran. That's where the population center is. Much of the area in the center there of the country is just empty. But there in Tehran is also where much of the regime's command leadership is concentrated. At the same time, something visually striking, I think, happened across the region. Airspace over Iran and large parts of the Middle East effectively went dark. Commercial traffic vanished. You see similar empty corridors over Ukraine and Eastern Europe, and these huge gaps in the global flight patterns are a stark reminder and an indicator of how there are multiple active conflicts happening across the globe right now, and they're just glomming closer and closer together to one another. It's creating visible holes in the map. This footage released by the United States government shows cruise missiles launching toward Iranian targets in the morning, because just in the first 12 hours of the campaign, U.S. forces alone reportedly carried out nearly 900 strikes across Iran. Did you see that footage of those Tomahawk cruise missiles flying just 200 feet overhead? They're flying what's called nap of the earth, as low as possible to avoid Iranian radar and missile intercepts. As they fly overhead, it sounds like a low-flying jet. That is insane to see footage of 21 of them flying right next to each other. And here we see the evidence of that F-35s and F-A-18E Super Hornets launching from U.S. aircraft carriers. Their strikes hit this Iranian drone platform and multiple ballistic missile launch sites, as we see in this footage from the government. Further south, Iranian naval facilities near Chabahar were also targeted, and that's interesting because those bases were left untouched during the 2025 strikes. So this is a major escalation that we're seeing here. This satellite image shows the aftermath.
So, once again, from a strategic standpoint, you see America aiming for the infrastructure. They're aiming, and this is in line with what was said, they're aiming to degrade possibilities of Iran basically having a counter-offensive. So, drone production, what the last one? Yeah, the jet facility, all them airports. Boy, this is a major combat offensive.
Inside the port, an Iranian frigate sits shattered and burning at the moorings after being hit. But first, all the editing work in today's episode was made possible only thanks to today's sponsor, Mando.
So wonderful. Love the work. We ain't gonna listen to Mando though.
Its air defenses failed to intercept the incoming American missiles. New information coming out since then states that that was possibly a torpedo strike against that Iranian warship. This is the first confirmed loss of an Iranian warship since Operation Praying Mantis in the 1980s. And this buildup happened over the past 2 months. It wasn't just out of nowhere. This graph here, though, shows the scale of U.S. force deployment in the region over the past month leading up to the attack. A lot of people were asking me if this might lead to a ground attack from here in the future, and you can see from the type of assets that the United States moved into theater, this isn't a lot of tanks and armored vehicles and large masses of troops. No, what we're looking at here is mainly air power at Tomahawk cruise missiles launched from air, land, and sea. We're not talking about a major ground campaign here. And really, it would kind of be impossible for the United States to conduct a ground campaign. The stated American objective was to annihilate the Iran.
In order to do a ground campaign, ladies and gentlemen, you must start to amass troops for about 6 months. And you also have to bear in mind the task. One of the reasons I mentioned the extreme size of Iran is they got a lot of caves to hide in. And they've been hiding in them for thousands of years. And it's also 90 million people. And you better believe there are people who are happy that the leader is dead. But there are also people who still support the regime, and a lot of those people, and this is the thing about regime change, a lot of those people are still in power. So it's not necessarily clear yet what's going to be the outcome of this situation.
Naval forces, like they did in the 1980s, reboot the sequel. This time we're serious. This I was not expecting. The U.S. military released footage of them firing the ATACMS missiles at targets inside of Iran. Where did they even do this from? How are they within range? The top range on those are about 300 miles. So people believe they were fired from inside of Iraq on the western border. Deeper than that, though, U.S. Central Command, CENTCOM forever as they're known, said on X that it had begun striking targets to, quote, dismantle the Iranian regime security apparatus. It said that the targets included the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps' command and control facilities, Iranian air defense capabilities, missile and drone launch sites, as well as military airfields. The first hours of the operation included precision munitions launched from air, land, and sea, and Operation Epic Fury involves reportedly the largest regional concentration of American military firepower in a generation. I thought it was surprising that President Trump came out and overtly said during his speech in an 8-minute address to the country that the overt goal was regime change operation. Personally, as an American hearing that, it's surprising to hear that just kind of putting the cards out on the table, not saying it's for something other than it is. It's surprising because in the past, many times leaders will play coy and be vague about their objectives, because if those objectives are not met by the military, this would be an embarrassment. But Trump stated that his goal is to overthrow the regime. Now, why would he hold himself to that? Why would he commit to that? Part of the reason from a strategic point of view, I could only give my personal read on it, is that it's because by saying that, by committing to regime change, it gives the Iranian people some kind of assurance that if they revolt, they try to take control, then the U.S. has their back with airstrikes. It's a bold.
Yes. I think I would concur with that. I think President Trump has asked the people of Iran. I think he's clearly said, listen, I've done my part. It is for you now to rise up and take over control of your country. And this start to be kind of where you got to look to see what the possible outcomes are. And there are also, you look throughout history and you see multiple different outcomes that are possible. Some would be a clear and outright win for the president. Others, not so much. But one example is having killed the leader. If another leader comes along who believes in democracy, who believes in capitalism, wants to be on good terms with the United States, pledges never to get a nuclear weapon, then this is outstanding work from Donald Trump. That's what it's gonna be. It's gonna be a total W. Give them access to the oil. They would put the oil back on the market. All of this would be fantastic for the United States. And for Trump, for everybody. That would be a win. No, less than a win is you get somebody in there who allow you in for a while and then they go back to their old ways. Basically, military dictatorship. And you get a game, but no, you got people in who you don't have any idea where they stand, how they look at things. That's also another outcome. I think the worst outcome is this turn into an extended regional conflict, bearing in mind when you had other conflicts recently in this part of the world, they weren't dealing with the population that is in Iran, and as I tell you, is over 90 million people there. If a wave of people, refugees, suddenly just leave Iran, they are going to pour into Europe, and that in and of itself is going to be another problem for the world to deal with at this time.
Strategy, and we're going to have to see how it actually plays out. I'm personally skeptical of regime change operations in the Middle East after taking part in one in Iraq, but I'm not here to tell you guys what to think. America successfully hit Iranian radar stations as seen in this footage here, and then CENTCOM reported that they were the first large-scale ever attacks by a one-way drone that America had just produced based on the Iranian Shaheds. So CENTCOM came out and tweeted that this was their retaliation for them, their retribution. This is a great meme that came out of Oceanit Technical on X. He says Iranian Shahed attack drones and their American copies passing each other over the Persian Gulf, looking at each other kind of awkwardly. As us unks would say, awkward turtle. So what's interesting about that is that Iranian Shahed drones are based on U.S. drone technology, which then copied Iran. It's a snake eating its own tail. Tyler Rodgeway, the head over at the War Zone, an aviation expert, tweeted that he believed the B-2 bomber would likely show up this night, dropping their payload of 80 of their 500-pound munitions, saying, quote, entire airfield's infrastructure gone in a single pass. They would not be employed until the night, and they now have the benefit of highly degraded air defenses and disrupted command and control. This is when the air campaign will change, according to Tyler Rodgeway. The Allies then came on to the attack at this point. As we'll see, the UK Prime Minister stated that they had joined the fight against Iran by lending their attack fighter jets. Then there was reports that Saudi Arabia had officially joined the fight as well, as reported by Fox and other sources. That would mean that what had been a long proxy war between Iran and Saudi Arabia had now just turned into a direct war. When looking at the statements made by the Saudi Arabian government, though, it's unclear if they're saying that they were ready to join the fight or if they had already done that. If we zoom out for a quick second here, I have to ask though, what effect will these attacks have? We've seen Cuba, Venezuela, and Iran, all client states of Russia, are now being pressed hard or already been pressed. These attacks seek to further weaken Russia's position in the war in Ukraine. I believe, my read of it, if the Islamic Republic is overthrown, it also weakens China's position because 20% of China's oil came from Venezuela and Iran. However, it's important to note that there is always blowback and unplanned consequences, second-order effects, if you will. Geopolitical analyst Robert Morse pointed out on X, saying every bit of pain China experiences through higher oil prices is experienced by all our European and Asian allies. It's a big gift to Russia too, he says, unquote. So it's unclear if this gamble by America...
And this is why I'm saying China is definitely a focus. And this is why I think that it is going to spill over. But it's not just a China issue. India going to feel this, Singapore going to feel this, Indonesia going to feel this, Vietnam going to feel this. All of these places make stuff that is consumed by us on a daily basis. And that translates to the cost of living.
America will pay off or not. Skeptics believe it'll backfire, and supporters believe that this is geopolitical chess at its finest. But zooming back in, according to the Institute for the Study of War, their map on the situation, Israel has reportedly focused on decapitation strikes and military targets, while the United States has focused mostly just on military targets. So a Persian Gulf port was targeted with its critical oil and port facilities being hit. U.S. forces have hit a number of Iranian naval bases on the Persian Gulf and the Gulf of Oman. The attacks were designed to decapitate the leadership and degrade the regime's network that suppresses rebellion.
So if you hear that term going forward, a decapitation strike is where they aim a strike at the leadership level, with the aim being to scatter, because you got to take time now to rebuild your command structure. They also, the same Revolutionary Guard, I think he died, how many grandchildren were there? I think one of his stepchildren was there. I think his son was there. Yeah, so a lot of people have been targeted and killed at this time in Iran, and that's what you call a decapitation strike. And this is why the people are being called upon to rally against the regime and take over the country. And this is also a result of the fact there's not any ground forces. This is air power doing all of this. You see B-2 bombers, those are the stealth bombers that you can't see. You see F-35s, you see the Hornets. These are the type of equipment that are over there. And the ATACMS, the missile launchers.
And we talked about this in a prior episode just a few days ago. We highlighted how the system of repression at the Thrala headquarters would likely be targeted. Here we see information from the IDF on which leaders were hit. The Thrala headquarters in Iran and its leadership was targeted. This is the organization responsible for suppressing those rebellions. The Israeli Air Force reportedly deployed 200 fighter jets that took off from their air bases and struck 500 military targets in western and central Iran. Their strike package included massive 2,000-pound bombs and standoff cruise missiles, which were aimed at Iran's remaining air defenses and ballistic missile launchers. They flew over Syria through a corridor where they refueled midair. Then they destroyed multiple targets in Iran. It appeared they had total air supremacy, Israel and the United States, at that moment. This corridor was further opened up and exploited through Syria from Israel after the fall of Assad. That's when it was really no threat for Israel to go through there and hit Iran through that corridor. This footage here, though, shows the effects of the attacks on these Iranian launch sites. This is being called the largest combat sortie in history. And according to the IDF, they struck multiple advanced SA-65 systems in western Iran, which had a range of over 20 kilometers. Over 200 American fighter jets joined the battle, intercepting incoming drones from Iran and missiles. Big loss from 2 aircraft carriers in the region. They also came from Jordan, the UAE, and Kuwait, just to name a few locations. The over 20 American warships, including destroyers and submarines, that had been built up in the region over the past few months, launched dozens of Tomahawk cruise missiles at their targets. People on the ground in the path of the missiles recorded it with their phones, and we saw some wild footage come out of this. Those missiles can fly, you're looking at right there, those American cruise missiles can fly at 1,500 miles distance at 500 miles per hour with 1,000-pound munition, a warhead on top of that. To put into context the Tomahawk strength, think of it as being able to level a small suburban lot. It can destroy a whole block with houses on it. Now take a look at this location here. This is a satellite image that it was obtained by the New York Times of the compound.
I never want to see any of this equipment in real life, by the way. I think it's fine just to see it right here. But I never want to get close to any of this equipment. You hear what this man said this thing go do? This thing go level a block. And a block is a big space of land.
Of the Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei. The battle damage assessment of the location shows the structure is extremely, let's say, damaged. We've since learned that multiple Iranian officials were killed in this one single strike. They all met at the same location in the morning. All of these bros that you're looking at here right now, they're all dead. The destroyed building.
With regards to this, right? It always struck me as insanity when I see multiple cabinet members traveling on the same flight. You know what that could... We don't know what could happen upon any of these flights. You know? There should never be a time, certainly, where the Prime Minister and the Deputy traveling on the same flight. So none of these things, in my estimation, shouldn't happen. Just in case the impossible happen to happen. Contingencies got to be in place.
Is smoking rubble. And since the start...
And this is also to show you the level of intelligence that the United States and Israel had. I think they say this intelligence came from the CIA, actually.
Part of the campaign, Khamenei has been reportedly out of contact, and we'll find out why in a second. Because thousands of IRGC personnel, including several senior officials, were reportedly killed or wounded at the military bases in the attack. This video footage here shows smoke rising from that location. More footage here, more evidence piles on top of what happened, and the satellite images appear to show there's 3 small holes that would likely be American bunker buster bombs, reminiscent of the ones that we saw during the attack on Fordo. But could it reach the Supreme Leader's underground bunkers? Well, later reports came out that the people in Iran were celebrating his death, and by later in the day, on the first day of the war, we got confirmation that Iran's Supreme Leader was indeed confirmed killed in the attack, and that his body had been recovered from the debris. Israel's Netanyahu came out and said that Khamenei was the architect of the plan to destroy Israel in October 7th. Then Reuters came out and reported this, that the American CIA had assessed that if Khamenei was killed, there's a chance that the IRGC hardliners in the military would take control of the country. This is according to intelligence reports that Reuters saw. So the CIA assessment gave a scenario where members of the IRGC were likely to assert a larger degree of control, but that they might be a little different, might be willing to curb the country's nuclear program or take a more conciliatory, hey, it's cool, we'll do whatever you want, United States, up to a limit. But who might be in line otherwise if it's not the hardliners. One, I believe, less likely scenario is Reza Pahlavi. He might take power. He addressed the Iranian people during the attacks on video, saying that now was time to take back control of the nation. He is the former...
A hardliner is somebody like me. Am I a hardliner? But a hardliner is somebody who will be strict. And they ain't running no joke on them kind of thing. Like, and they talking about hardliners. They want to fight until the last man kind of circumstance. That's what them do. And these are also some of the variables, because I mean, one thing that is being ignored is that there was some kind of I think they call it a fatwa, and the Ayatollah did say that nuclear weapons are an abomination and they shouldn't be pursued. I think that is being ignored. But so we don't know if somebody who, as he describing as a hardliner, is gonna take a different position. So these are some of the uncertainties they are when you replace one with the other. Don't cry for who they, cry for who will come.
Shah's son, who was overthrown in 1979 by the current regime that's in power right now, and he said that now is their time, with this aid arriving, for final victory that could be in their hands. Many want Reza to reclaim control in Iran as what he claims would be an acting transition authority. He would just kind of be there momentarily, who would usher in an elected official afterwards. When you look at the type of locations and type of targets chosen, they paint a picture of an attempt to destroy the IRGC security forces that are responsible for suppressing protests. So US-based human rights activist news agency estimated that the death toll was 7,000 during the January protests, and the Iranian government said that the death toll was 3,000. Others claim it was 32,000. Whatever the number was, the attempt is to give the protesters now an opportunity, a window to overthrow the government. U.S. operatives actually spent the last month smuggling in thousands of Starlink terminals to help the rebellion stay connected, even after the regime shuts down the internet like they did last time.
The thing I'm not sure about with regards to this take over the government, right? If you imagine this thing like any country, there will be roughly half the people who don't believe in it, you know? Typically, half of the people don't believe in it. So I do believe that there are people in Tehran who are happy that the supreme leader is dead, and they really would like to see Iran go in a different direction in certain perspectives, right? But that does not take away from the fact that he got people there with guns, and unless those people do not have any means to control the people by having said guns, I don't know how this is gonna work. And that's where we just span a knife edge. We'll see what is gonna take place. If you hear 5 years from now, Iran is having regular elections, stunning. But are we likely to get that? That's the question.
And this time. So far, the strikes have reportedly 86 killed the Iranian defense minister as well, and the Revolutionary Guard Corps' commander. They're all believed to have been killed in these attacks. It was also reported that the Supreme National Security Council secretary was also killed. At least 4 senior Iranian intelligence ministry officials killed. The head of the snake is off, and the question is, what will the body do as it thrashes about? During the failed negotiations, the US and Israel were demanding basically a permanent an end to all uranium enrichment, strict limits on Iran's ballistic missile program, which was a no-go for them, a non-starter, and a complete halt to support for regional proxy groups like supporting Hamas and Hezbollah and the Houthis. Iran was unable or unwilling to comply on all those accounts. So now let's talk about the other piece of the three pieces of the pie, Iran's retaliation. Then we'll get into the bigger geopolitical picture of how this fits in. In retaliation, Iran launched dozens of ballistic missiles, hitting many targets. The missiles impacted all over the region, and by later in the evening local time in Iran, about 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, ballistic missiles were still landing in central Tel Aviv despite efforts to totally neutralize those launchers. So Bahrain, Iraq, Israel, Kuwait, Saudi Arabia, Qatar, UAE were all attacked, including 14 American bases. It appears like when it got...
It seemed like Iran's strategy, and from what I've heard from that side, it seemed like anything with the United States flag is a target for the retaliation. So that's why you hear this widespread a country, and this is why it's a possibility this turning into a regional conflict. In which case, think about the fact that when Hillary Clinton and Obama took out Gaddafi, Libya is still not one country since that time. So if we set up this could be Arab Spring 2.0. Possibly.
Dark in the Middle East is when Iran started firing more ballistic missiles. That may have been the reason why the US and Israel chose to attack early in the morning, because they knew Iran would have to wait until the evening to get their missile launchers out into position to hide at night. More impacts were increasingly reported after Israel only said there was 35 missiles that impacted in the morning. Oceanit Technical reported more Patriot intercepts as night fell. I want to show you more evidence visually of Iran's retaliation. US Patriot missiles were engaging, more Patriots firing off multiple salvos at a time, more drone strikes. This footage shows an Iranian drone making it through US air defense and hitting a radar station. According to the US official in Bahrain, at the headquarters of US Navy's 5th Fleet, the Iranians hit an empty warehouse only and a radome, that there's video footage evidence of these strikes. But CENTCOM reported that so far in the first at least 12 hours, there have been no US casualties or combat deaths since the start of the operation, which is kind of wild to think that none of these 400 aircraft were shot down. As we got closer to midnight Eastern Standard Time, what we saw was Iran released this message saying that they're doing massive retaliatory strikes. And this is something I was listening to the Enforcer live earlier, great channel, and they were talking about how Iran basically has this doomsday plan, this doomsday scenario where their doctrine is to unleash all of their missiles in the event of a decapitation strike. They release all their missiles at once. So right now, as we speak, we're seeing that happen. We don't know how effective or not that'll actually be, though. There are claims of drones hitting U.S. CRAM and air defense in Iraq, but we're not sure if that happened. In past engagements with Israel and the U.S. over the past year or two, they had lost many of their launchers in Iran, so they depleted their missile inventory by about half by striking the warehouses that were holding all these missiles. And Iran was reportedly down from 480 of their TEL ballistic missile launchers to only 100, so they could only fire from a third of their launchers. It also takes time to refuel and reload the missiles after each volley that Iran does. The Houthis also restarted their campaign of strikes against ships trying to cross through the Red Sea. This Patriot missile system, evidence of it intercepting a ballistic missile while a leaker got through, and it reportedly hit Al Udeid Air Base in Qatar, striking and damaging a clinic. What this continues to show us is evidence that air defense is not magic. It can blunt missile attacks, but it cannot simply just fully stop them. U.S. CENTCOM reported its forces had defended against hundreds of Iranian strikes following the initial wave of U.S. and partner strikes. CENTCOM forces successfully defended against hundreds of Iranian missiles and drone attacks, it said. The cell phone footage found posted by Oceanit Defender account on X. He's a friend of the show, arguably the best open source intelligence account out there. He stated that it hit a resident building in Bahrain, and those have a payload of over 100 pounds. They can destroy a whole apartment or flatten a single house in some cases. More drones on drones on drones. More evidence of attacks in Bahrain. More intercepts. The big strategic prize in this region is the Strait of Hormuz that Iran has stated that they have control over. It's a major global shipping lane for Saudi and Iranian oil, just for starters. It had been effectively closed according to Tasnim, which is the Iranian state media. Then when we look at the maritime tracker, we can see there is still some traffic that's going through there as of the day. Oil tankers, though, have reportedly U-turned to avoid sailing through there. The IRGC said that it was off limits and that they had effectively blockaded it. Let's discuss the legality of this briefly, and I'm not here to tell you what to think. I tell you what I think and what the facts are on both sides of the argument usually. So President Trump's unilateral decision to launch a major attack on Iran has people debating if this was authorized use of force or not. Some claim, including Republicans.
Before he got into the legal aspect of this thing, from what I understand, both sides have said the other side soon run out of weapons, and at that time they are gonna take full advantage. I have heard it said that Iran's supply is low from the Israelis and they don't have any launchers and all this thing, and I also hear Iran say they're using their old stuff. They not bring out none of the new thing yet. So we shall see. This is what I call a battle of attrition. And in a battle of attrition, who won it more is who gonna win at the end of the day. But both sides are saying the next side soon run out. So we are gonna see who ultimately could strive until the end of the day. Now let me hear about the legality.
He violated the Constitution by starting a war without congressional authorization. Next week, Congress will debate this, but now on the other side of the argument is that the U.S. designated the IRGC in Iran as a terrorist organization, and so because of that, they are technically legally allowed to conduct strikes on them, and technically is the best kind of okay. Basically, normally the president would need authorization after 60 days of a attack like this. Many presidents have skirted that though in the past, including Obama and Trump as well. Now, the final piece of the puzzle, the three-piece pie, is the geopolitics. Now, I think that it is not a coincidence that the United States moved against Mexico, the biggest cartel leader, El Mencho, and then this happens at the same time. Personally, I think the U.S. is implementing part of their stated grand strategy this week that they've written about extensively in unclassified documents, as well as the authors of those documents have spoken about this on their Twitter accounts, revealing their intentions purposefully to the world. And it's the attempt to topple Iran's government is likely linked to efforts to increase.
The documents he's speaking about are documents that have referenced the national defense strategy, the national security strategy. These documents outline what the United States is trying to achieve, their objectives, their goals, and the strategies and tactics they're going to implement broadly to achieve those objectives and goals.
Pressure on China and Russia between Venezuela and Iran. That is because between Venezuela and Iran, that's where China gets 20% of their oil imports, and they get it at a steep, heavy discounted price. By targeting the shadow fleet of oil tankers, the U.S. is attempting to crack down on their adversaries in this one action. So the U.S.-Mexico joint operation against the top cartel boss in Mexico, El Mencho, is also part of this grand strategy. The CGNG cartel was pressuring and preventing foreign investment in Mexico. They were taking 15% cut of everything that was going over the border. So the U.S. plan to decouple from China has everything to do with relying on Mexico as a partner for production instead of buying from China. So the North American supply chain is being locked down for strategic purposes. If China were to invade Taiwan, the U.S. cannot engage in a war in the Middle East or a war in Europe, or deal with proxy instability of the cartel on their southern border. So it would need 100% of American focus on the Pacific. Whether or not this strategy will backfire or be ineffective is another question entirely. But we are seeing a grand strategy, a new doctrine being put into place. It's much more complicated than that, but Trump stated that from here, he could go in many directions. He said he has many off-ramp possibilities. He said that he could take all of Iran or end it in 2 or 3 days. He stated that in any case, it would take them, the regime in Iran, several years to recover from this attack. To learn more, check out this video about the most insane cartel firefights caught on.
Yeah, we don't miss the copy. Since he has spoken, there are a couple updates. I think 4 persons have died in the U.S. military. At least that was the last I checked a couple hours ago. There have also been reports of civilian damage, I think on both sides really. I think a hotel was hit in Dubai, schools hit in Iran, and civilian targets also in Israel. So this is a mess until it ends, and we don't know what ending it looks like, because even if the United States were to pull their assets out, we don't know. As I say, if this is gonna be a regional conflict, if this is gonna be a religious war amongst the Islamic groups, so pay attention to what is going on, bear in mind what is going on, and understand that what is going on, even though it is thousands of miles away from you, it will have an effect on your life, cost of living, quality, and start to ask your leaders what they have in place to make sure that these shocks are able to be absorbed by the government. We also spoke about a couple other things. Why the elites want more children. Why the central banks have been purchasing gold. All these situations. And tomorrow, just to remind you once again, have the album launch at 6, 7 if you're in Nevis or the Eastern Caribbean. And then you got Banky and Yasan with the premiere. So make sure you ask the pertinent questions, the burning questions. Don't get sidetracked. Remain focused on the bigger picture. And in your life, control your smaller picture so you're contributing to the bigger picture too. But anyway, and it have a little early tonight, start on time and half on time. Everybody happy. Also, I apologize for not getting to the press conference. I messed up. Seemed like I had a senior moment with the technology. So that's on me. And I was excited too. But next week we might talk about that. But this week, what's going on in the Middle East is important. So pay attention. Let me play that. Let me play this. I hear this time I play this.
Reach nowhere, so you have to find a way, find a way. You know what to see you fly. You know what to see you touch down. You know what to see you fly. Hey. Bling bling, now me call it King Kong. Every song I write, hit song. Every song I write. Which song? Tell me something. Am I wrong? To believe in myself. Put nobody above myself. Energy, energy, build your energy. Love, charity. What a sight to see. What a sight to see. What a colossal. Working and working and working to prosper. What you gonna stop for? Keep on this right on the corner. Hey, make way when I'm weird there. Hey, tell the ear to them stay there. Hey, that is your destiny. To be what you ought to be. Even if no one you reach nowhere. So you have to find a way. Them no one you reach nowhere. So you have to find a way. Them no one to see you fly. Them no one to see you touch sky.
It is not possible for federal people to at all. We know everything we know about federal government. It is not to survive militarily. It's not justice to produce another hero for years. To bend the statue of the fighting but they were never capable of reuniting. And who reunited China? The Mongols. With a bunch of completely non-Chinese. In fact, when the Mongols conquered China, they were the least Chinese of all the confederation of tribes that were enemies of the Chinese. And yet they conquered China. And long history, I won't go into that. And only the Mongols were having conquered China. Ironically, when the Mongols are driven out, the Chinese were able to, as it were,
reach nowhere. So you have to
and became the main dynasty.
Them no one you reach nowhere.